politically, not militarily on the battlefield, but politically, Putin's on the ropes and Zelensky is surging. It's really interesting to watch. Now, that is not to discount and say that it's not tough for the Ukrainian army on the battlefield, particularly around Покровsk, but politically, like everything keeps coming up for Zelensky. So let's talk about what's happening here, because this is really important. So let's start here. Zelensky put this out, a productive conversation with President Trump, with the key focus, of course, being ending the war. We are grateful to President of the United States for all efforts toward a just and lasting peace. It is truly a must to stop the killing as soon as possible, and we fully support this. And they've been supporting this all along. Today, we coordinate our positions, Ukraine and the United States. We exchanged assessments of the situation. The Russians have intensified the brutality of their attacks. President Trump is fully informed about Russian strikes on Kyiv and other cities and communities. Of course, we spoke about sanctions against Russia, and that's what I'm talking about, what's coming up right for Zelensky and some other things here. Their economy continues to decline. That's point number 2 of what's big for Ukraine. And that's exactly why Moscow is so sensitive to this prospect and President Trump's resolve, because the tariffs on India and China and Brazil that cause them not to buy oil, if that comes into effect and that actually does do what they hope it would do, it would be very hard on Russia. We discussed joint European decisions that can help our defense. Commitments made from the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, $1 billion of American weapons that Ukraine will receive. And I'm going to show you what we're talking about here. We also discussed our bilateral defense cooperation with America. The draft agreement on drones has already been prepared by the Ukrainian side. We are ready to discuss it in detail and conclude it. That drone thing is bigger than the minerals agreement. The U.S. needs what Ukraine has with drones, and that's a good thing to keep them in, doing the right thing by selling these kinds of things and maybe even giving some. Okay, thank you to every American heart that supports our defense of life. Thank you, President Trump. Well, that's a really interesting tone, and it's quite a shift from a month ago or 2 months ago. Remember the Oval Office? Wow. Okay, so President Trump says if energy goes down low enough, Putin is going to stop killing people. If you get energy down another $10 a barrel, he's going to have no choice because his economy stinks. Okay, there's something to that. There is something to the lower the price of oil goes, the more difficult it's going to be for Putin. Here's another from Zelensky. Today, we have another important decision with the framework of the initiative to procure American weapons, an additional $500 million from our friends in Northern Europe, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. So this was on the back of something else that happened yesterday. But this is a very strong initiative, significantly boost our ability to protect lives. Yesterday, there was a $500 million contribution from the Netherlands. Okay, what are we talking about? So Sweden, Norway, Denmark commit $486 million for weapons for Ukraine through a NATO fund. And I talked about the NATO fund and how it works a couple of days ago. I'll show you again. The 3 Nordic countries are joining forces to finance the delivery of U.S.-made weapons to Ukraine. So America's still selling it. Yes. Should they give it? Sure, absolutely. But if they're willing to sell it and buyers will buy it and it gets to Ukraine, it gets to Ukraine, and that's the bottom line. This adds to the earlier contribution from the Netherlands. Well, what are we talking about from the Netherlands? Ukraine needs more air defense and ammunition now. As the first NATO ally, the Netherlands will deliver a 500 million euro package of U.S. weapon systems, including Patriot parts and missiles. So that happened just yesterday. Here is the ambassador to NATO talking about it. Listen to this.
Hello. I'm Matt Whitaker, the U.S. Ambassador to NATO. I want to thank the people and the government of the Netherlands for their leadership in launching this delivery of life-saving munitions and equipment for Ukraine. This delivers on President Trump's initiative to get U.S. equipment paid for by our Canadian and European NATO allies into the hands of the Ukrainian warfighter. And it builds upon last month's monumental meeting in the Oval Office. As President Trump says, American industry and innovation create the best equipment on earth. This allows Ukraine to protect critical infrastructure and civilian lives while also staying in the fight until a lasting ceasefire happens. We expect this to be the first of many similar contributions, as we promote peace through strength here at NATO, the world's greatest alliance.
First of many. And here's how it'll work. And I talked about this just the other day. NATO is launching a $10 billion with a B weapons fund to rush American arms to Ukraine, bypassing bureaucratic delays. The combat wallet, funded by Europe, allows Ukraine to request weaponry in $500 million tranches. And you saw two of those. So it was $1 billion 48 hours for Zelensky. That's a good day in and of itself. But I think the alignment between Zelensky and Trump right now is, the stars are really aligning for him. It's really interesting to watch. Look at this. Trump voters want Trump to toughen up on Russia. What? Trump voters do? Like that? Does that hurt your head? Because it shouldn't really hurt your head, but it does. It's something really interesting. Trump voters want Trump to toughen up on Russia. 76% of Trump voters back stronger sanctions on Russian energy. 77% see Russia as a threat. How about that? And now there's something quite right about that. I see Ukraine stickers or Ukraine flags or things along those lines. I have yet to see a Russian sticker or flag or support of Russia anywhere that I've gone in the United States. Target Point poll, Vandenberg Coalition, 74% of Trump voters believe Putin will invade other countries if he's not stopped. That's what's going to happen, right? Alexander Dugin has lost faith in Trump. I have come to a very sad conclusion. Donald Trump is totally mad. It's a shame. We loved him. Loved, past tense. They loved him. Yeah. Okay. Look at this. This is Dugin talking. Sean Pinner posted this. I usually don't share Russian propaganda, but this clip has value. Just months ago, Alexander Dugin, Putin's fascist philosopher and ideological mouthpiece, was praising Trump as a MAGA ally. Now he says that Trump has gone neocon. Well, when he's saying neocon, he means people like me. He means traditional conservatives. I call myself a Reagan conservative, who are like, you know what? You can't let Russia do that. They got to be stopped. Okay, so let's listen to what he has to say here. Okay, Trump has abandoned his MAGA strategy, says Dugin. I don't know if any elements of it remain, but it seems that there are none left. He simply abandoned the positions of the adopted the positions of classic neoconservatives and went back to what Biden was doing. Unconditional support for the Nazi junta in Ukraine, a drive to inflict strategic defeat on Russia. Yeah, this is where traditional conservatives like me actually resided the whole time. When they rolled across the border, I was like, what? What are you doing? We got to do something about this. And people like me were right there with you. And then I looked around and I was surprised, like, how did all the liberals get here? Where'd they come from? They're not usually the ones like this. And to their credit, they were out in force where conservatives weren't, or well, MAGA Republicans weren't. Traditional conservatives like me were. And by pressure, all means, including the threat of direct nuclear conflict with Moscow. Okay, so that's where Dugin is with this. Okay, Putin has lost MAGA. Look at this. Jay and Keefe posted this, and he's no friend of MAGA. Fewer than 1 in 5 Trump voters advocate for no support for Ukraine. Look at it. Look at the number. Okay, the average is 18%. Traditional conservative at 18, no action 18%. MAGA conservative at 17%. Moderates at 16%. Okay, so direct military support for Ukraine, traditional, that's people like me at 56%. Direct for MAGA, it's 51%. Moderates, those are the closest to liberal, would be 59%. So there's not a lot of daylight between traditional conservative and moderates on this. And then MAGA's not too far behind. And then doing other actions, 71, 74, and 70% respectively. Yeah. And so and now I said this before, but where Trump goes, that's where MAGA is going to go. MAGA is not so much ideologically aligned. Like I'm a traditional conservative. I'm ideologically focused. You can predict that I'm going to keep going that same direction. Wherever Trump goes, that's where MAGA is going, because they bought into Trump. And so if he's changed his mind on this, they're generally following him. Not everyone. There's still Marjorie Taylor Greene out there talking about how Trump has betrayed MAGA. But most rank and file of MAGA has actually followed Trump, which is really interesting. Okay, Putin is unlikely to yield to Trump's ultimatum, which expires on Friday. He remains confident in Russia's victory and doubts the effectiveness of new sanctions. However, he's also wary of provoking Trump. Well, he should be wary of provoking Trump. There's a good reason for that. Now, Dmitry Peskov talking about this. Russia can now take appropriate steps after scrapping its missile moratorium. Russia no longer considers itself limited by anything. It is unlikely that the announcement should be expected. This concerns the defense sector and non-public. So we can put our missiles where we want. Yeah, that's only going to inflame the situation. They're trying to... Okay, so they're used to having just if I'm just going to intimidate you, you're just going to do what I say. I think it's going to backfire this time. I think before that tough talk, when Trump was trying to Vladimir and I, we have a great relationship. I think that was going to work then. I think it might have worked with Biden with trying to keep him from pushing forward because, oh no, I don't want them to nuke us. I don't think it's going to work now. I think something has changed in Trump. Russian Foreign Ministry statement on the withdrawal of the moratorium on deployment of medium and short-range missiles is the result of NATO countries' anti-Russian policy. It's their fault. NATO caused this, after all, so you have to blame it on them, according to Medvedev. This is a new reality. All our opponents will have to reckon with. Expect further steps. Again, I think it's going to backfire. But while that's backfiring, the ISW put this out. The Russians haven't really had a good response to Trump pushing back. Kremlin officials utilized three main framings to respond to Trump's decision to redeploy the submarines, posing Trump's decision to redeploy as submarines as emotional or discounting the threat that this decision poses and posturing Russia as more responsible in as an international actor than the United States. Isn't that interesting? No, you're not more responsible. You nuclear saber rattle all the time. Okay, so the emotional one I could kind of buy, right? I mean, Trump's all over the map with stuff, but they don't know how to handle this. These official Russian responses ignore the Kremlin's history of frequently leveraging nuclear saber rattling to push the West to make decisions that benefit Russia. They do it all the time. Okay, the Kremlin also responded to Trump's August 1 announcement by trying to downplay Medvedev's role in Russian decision-making in order to obfuscate the role that Medvedev plays in Putin's information efforts. I want to say misinformation efforts, and that would have been true. Putin would be able to censor Medvedev's statements if he chose to, but he doesn't. And because he doesn't, you know that there's something going on here. Okay, let's look at this. Medvedev's aggressive statements serve a specific purpose for Putin. However, they push the West to see Putin's statements as more moderate and rational by comparison. Bingo. Okay, so in the academic literature, we see that if you're going to deal with a pricing strategy, you sell something for $1, you sell something for $7, and you sell something for $11. And you really necessarily don't want the $1 version. You want them to buy the $7 version. But if you just have 1 and 7, 7 looks extreme. But if you have an $11 version, 11, well, that's costly, so I'll buy the $7 version. That's how that works. And that's what's going on with Medvedev with his crazy talk. Okay. Kremlin ended a ban on deploying land-based ballistic cruise missiles. This is what they're talking about, with ranges of 500 and 5,500 kilometers. Russia blames steps on the collective West for destabilizing the border regions. Yeah, it's not going to go well. Okay, now let's talk about India. India and China and Brazil soak up a lot of Russia's oil. And if one or more of those players was peeled off, it would hurt. 2 or more of those players peeled off, it would be devastating to Russia. Nikki Haley posted this: India should not be buying oil from Russia, but China, an adversary and the #1 buyer of Russian and Iranian oil, got a 90-day tariff pause. Don't give China a pass and burn a relationship with a strong ally like India. Okay, so India, you ought to stop doing that. But China, they shouldn't get a pass. That's for sure. Okay, and now look, the Kremlin doesn't want what's going to happen to happen. Like, okay, theoretically, the deadline, and I get you. If you don't believe that it's going to happen, no problem. I don't fault you for that because Trump's been all over the map. He zigs and zags, mostly zigging toward Russia. Okay, so if you're saying I'll wait till I see it, I got you. I understand. But the Kremlin slamming Trump's tariff pressure on India over Russian oil as illegal? I mean, it's laughable. Wait, so having a tariff's legal, but running over the border of Ukraine and just sowing destruction every night, that's perfectly fine? Okay. Anyway, they're really worried about this. Putin is very worried. It's all looking up politically for Zelensky at this point, and like that's just where we are. In fact, it's to the point that I want to show you probably the best visual I can come up with for what's going on here with Zelensky. Okay, this is Frisbee golf this guy is playing, right? I mean, politically, the stars are just aligning, and look at this. Bam. Like, I mean, that's what it's looking like for Zelensky. It's just coming together. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. Put in the comments. Tell me what you think about what I've said here, because on the battlefield, it's tough, but politically, it's starting to come together, I think. Now, I don't know what the sanctions will do. I mean, I think Trump will actually impose the sanctions because the sanctions are tariffs, and he wants to impose tariffs. Like that's, and I'll explain why in another video that's a bad idea, but it's still going to help Ukraine. Okay, in my next video, in fact, I'll do that. But yeah, it's coming up roses for Zelensky right now. Tell me what you think about that. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.